Hello job seekers, Melanie here with CGL Recruiting. And today we're going to be talking about following up after an interview. I'm so happy to hear that lots of you are starting to get interviews. And if you haven't yet, don't worry, your time will come. Keep at it. The jobs are starting to open up in certain areas and segments. Keep going. But for those of you that are actually getting interviews, and whether that's a phone interview, a Skype or GoToMeeting interview, or a face-to-face interview, you always should try to follow up. Now let's talk about some different methods and what I think you should always include in a follow-up letter. Now, if you haven't subscribed yet, please consider doing that now. Ring that bell for notifications. And if you feel that this data is helpful, please give me that thumbs up and share it with other job seekers who are looking for their next great role. Okay, so you had an interview and it's time to follow up. Hopefully during the interview process or in the prep for the interview process, you've gotten the names and even best case scenario, the email addresses of the people that you're actually going to be speaking with. If you don't have their email addresses, don't panic, because we live in such a great digital world that it is easy nowadays to find somebody's email address. Especially if you have their first and last name and they are working for a company, you can usually go out and start searching around the company and find an email address of somebody who is at that company already, and then you know what their naming convention is. There's only 5 or 6 that are really used a lot, like first initial dot last name at the company name. So if you do some Google searches, most times you can figure out. There are also some websites that will try to get you this data. Be careful, some of them want to charge you. And as a job seeker, you need to be conserving cash. So I don't recommend paying. Do a little bit of work and you'll find it on your own. So you have this email address for them. Nowadays, most people do like to follow up via email. And the reason is because it is so quick. You don't have to wait for the regular US postal mail or whatever mail in the country that you're in to get a letter or a note to them. However, I do want to tell you that a handwritten thank you note, and I'm going to show you some examples, like all of these, can really go a long way. I tend to find that when you have a handwritten note, you will see that individuals, HR people, hiring managers, tend to take more time to read the text that's inside as opposed to an email one that you do. So it is something that I would like you to consider. If you think you can do this quick enough and get it out to them, sometimes this handwritten note can really make a difference. If you are not doing a handwritten thank you note and you are utilizing email, listen, that's okay. Just we want to make sure we're structuring it in a way that you have the best chance of it getting read. I'm sorry to tell you, but people are inherently going to scan these. They're most likely not going to read it all in depth. So you putting a huge amount of information in there that makes it 2 pages long, you're wasting your time and you're not getting the attention of the person that you just interviewed with. You want to make it no longer than half a page. Any longer than that, and it's definitely going to be just scanned and done. Now, when we look at thank you notes like this or follow-up notes, you're not having to worry about any sort of applicant tracking system. It's not a concern. So you don't have to stuff them with keywords. You want to focus on very specific points. So here's the format that I recommend when you are sending one of these. You want to have your short introductory paragraph at the top that says, thank you very much for taking the time to interview me for the following position. That puts them in a frame of reference of knowing, okay, it's this person and I talked with them about this role. Remember, sometimes these hiring managers are seeing 20 people as they have a variety of different roles available. So you need to frame the thank you note with your name and the position right in that first paragraph. And then the middle section, I recommend you choose 3 things that you think make you a great match to this position. And it could be either hard skills or it could be soft competencies. And I would even say in some ways, if you can do something that's more of a competency like, project management or leadership, as opposed to something that's very, very hard skill, like stage gate project management. You want to be a little bit broader, but you definitely want to have 3 things that connect you and what's great about you to the job that you just interviewed for. And then here's the next tip. You want to use bold strategically. Remember, this is the same when we're looking at a resume or a cover letter. You need to market yourself and the eyes of the person that's reading that document, leading them to the data that you want to lead them to. So for those 3 things, let's say you choose project management, leadership, and global P&L management. And I just picked those 3 out of the sky. But you want to bold those 3 words and use bullets to make it very easy to read that middle section. Then you, of course, want to do an ending that's going to just say, again, I appreciate the time that you spent interviewing with me, and I look forward to hearing from you and the organization about how we can move forward together. But it's all about that middle section where you're giving those 3 bulleted areas. Now, if you do choose to do one of these handwritten type thank you notes, that is wonderful, and you have a better chance of getting the entire text read. But if you do this, you have very, very limited space, and you can't make it like a teeny tiny, little handwriting that nobody can read. So you do need to make sure that you are being strategic when you're utilizing a handwritten note. I still recommend, if you can get in those 3 things, don't just do fluff, right? We want to make sure that we're not just saying thank you, appreciate the interview, look forward to hearing from you soon. Take this time to one more time hit them with the information of how you are a great match to this position. So, how often can you follow up? So if you do choose to do one of these handwritten notes, you are going to have to make sure that you get it out as quick as you possibly can. In email, it should be really easy to do it the same day. The handwritten, try to also get it out the same day if you possibly can. Now, when we're looking at following up, you really should only do it once. One time. And I know a lot of you are like, but wait, they've ghosted me. They haven't answered anything back. I really think you should only do a thank you one time. And that is with the general people that you're interviewing with. I am going to say, if there is a center person that either their HR team, the recruiter that helped schedule you for the interview, that is the only person you really should follow up with more than once. The reason for that is you do not want to come across too strong with the hiring manager. Now, there are exceptions to every rule, right? And we'll talk about that in just a second. But in general, try to follow up with them once, and then all the rest of your follow-throughs, try to go through with either the HR or recruiter or whoever it was that set up the initial interview and scheduled it with you. So how often can you follow up with that person? I recommend you only follow up once a week. And let me tell you, for those of you who are thinking, well, I want to make sure I can talk with them on the phone, I'm just going to keep calling them all week until I see eventually that they pick up the phone. Unfortunately, I don't recommend you do that nowadays because it's too easy to see on everybody's phones who is calling. And I promise you, if that recruiter or HR person sees your name again and again and again popping up on their phone and they're just not answering, you don't want to be seen as that person who's over following up. If they don't answer, leave a message. I actually prefer for you guys to send an email than to call on the follow up. And the reason for this is there's more than one way to apply pressure. And if you send an email to follow up and you don't hear anything back, when it's the next time for you to follow up, I recommend you take that message you sent and forward it to the person. And again, say, hi, I just wanted to follow up again. And that puts an internal pressure on that individual. And I find that you get more responses back than you do if you just send an absolutely clean message. So let's say you've been following up with this person and you've done it every week for a week, 2 weeks, and you're not getting any responses. Of course, you can try to call them. If you feel like you've gone a reasonable amount of time and you have not heard back from them, then at that point, can you go back and touch base with some of the other people that you interviewed with? You just need to be careful, right? Because it is going to most likely have a bad reflection on that other recruiter or person who may end up being part of your team in a week or two. So make sure when you're doing it, just do it really appropriately. You don't know the reason that they haven't followed up with you. It may be that the internal recruiter or talent acquisition person has been trying to get data from the hiring manager, and the hiring manager's been traveling or just has not responded. So you don't know who's the reason that there's no follow-up occurring. You always need to be the one that takes the high road as a job seeker, always. Now, eventually, I'm going to tell you there's going to be some positions that you're just going to get ghosted on and you're never going to hear anything back. And I am sorry for those. And it's not a good practice. Does it happen? Of course it happens. And there's nothing you can do after a certain point. I do recommend, though, that you still take the high road. Do not go off on them. Do not put negative posts on them about LinkedIn. You don't know the whole story, because I'll tell you what I've seen happen before, and they shouldn't have ghosted either way, but I have seen where companies are going through a process and they have a great set of candidates that they're interviewing, and they end up making an offer to one, and they're working through the negotiation and working through all of that person starting, and last minute something goes wrong. Either that person gets a counteroffer from their current employer, gets another job, they don't pass a drug screen or a background check or some other requirement the company has. And so what ends up happening is they have to go back to square one. You might have been their next runner-up candidate. Now, should they have treated you better through this interview process? Yes, they should have, and they should have followed up with you. But don't shoot yourself in the foot and not get considered because of the way you managed it. If one person in that company is not, following up appropriately, it doesn't still mean that it may not be an amazing company for you to join. Anyway, so I hope this answers some of your questions on following up. If you have further questions, put them down below and I will answer them for everybody. Listen, I also want to let you know that we're going to be starting to do some live events on YouTube. So stay tuned for those, where we will have the opportunity to do a live Q&A with all of you. I'm very excited about it, and I hope we get to answer a lot of your individual questions. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.